Be holy my child, because I am holy. Whoever wants to be a perfect disciple of my heart, strives to become holy, as I also am holy, by an interior, true, and solid holiness. Holiness is a great good, it contains all blessings desirable upon earth, and begets everlasting bliss in heaven. Holiness is the completion of virtue, the guardian of sanctifying grace, the preserver of inward peace, the nurse of the heart's joy, and of ever-enduring happiness. Holiness is true wisdom, real glory, inexhaustible wealth. To be the least of the saints is something incomparably greater than to be the greatest of the whole world. What is there in this world that can justly be compared with holiness? Not science, not dignity, not renown, not the possession of all riches. For all these things are only of earth, they last but for a moment, like vapors in the air, they glisten, and soon disappear. But holiness is heaven-born, and permanent, it glitters before the inhabitants of permanent, it glitters before the inhabitants of heaven, like the sun. When the sun fades away, it shall continue to shine forevermore. Let not then the wise man glory in his wisdom, let not the strong man glory in his strength, let not the rich man glory in his wealth, but he that glories, let him glory in this, that he knows and loves me, and thus sanctifies himself. My child, if you do not understand these things at present, you shall understand them later, even in spite of yourself, when at the near approach of death, you shall entertain more correct sentiments. Tell me, if you had to die, which would you rather desire, to be a saint, or to have been a king or a pope? Would to God, exclaimed when dying, one who had been a ruler, and had some experience in the matter, would to God, that I had never been a ruler, but, in its stead, the least of God's holy servants. Would, sighed another, that I had not worn the tiara, but had passed my life in the kitchen of some house consecrated to God. You cannot value holiness too highly, since I myself have held it at such esteem that, to make it possible and easy, I poured out the treasures of my heart, multiplied the means at my greatest costs, and ordered all things for the sanctification of the elect. Therefore, aspire to so great a good, my child, and strive magnanimously to become a saint. Do you say these things of yourself, my child, or have others suggested it to you? If of yourself, you are mistaken; if at the suggestion of others, you have been deceived. And first, if you have sinned during your life, behold, this is a new reason why you should sanctify yourself, that, by the future, you may make amends for the past. But, my child, there is no question of what you have been, but of what you ought to be, from now. How many souls there are that, after having committed sins, have reached in a shorter time a higher degree of perfection than others that have remained innocent. And the remembrance of the sins which they had unfortunately committed, and which had been most mercifully forgiven by me, as a spur to urge and goad themselves on to sanctity. The sins that have been committed are, therefore, not only no hindrances, but, if you are willing, may be instruments of holiness. Besides, my child, to strive after the perfection of virtue, to aspire to sanctity, is not pride, nor presumption, but greatness, but nobleness of soul, without which no one is worthy to be a disciple of my heart. These things I say, and take heed, which of the two you will believe, me, or the Spirit, your enemy, who suggests the contrary. Beware, my child, lest, after being deluded, you become faint-hearted, and, consequently, incapable of aspiring to these things, which alone are most deserving of the aspirations of every noble heart. Raise your courage, cast aside all littleness of heart, and cherish sentiments worthy of a disciple of my heart. Lastly, if you are weak, am not I strong? If you cannot undergo austerities, are you unable to love? If you cannot act, are you unable to suffer? Now, it is most of all by loving and by suffering that holiness is acquired. It is not by extraordinary works, not by miracles, but by love, a patient love, that the sanctification of the soul is chiefly promoted. Endeavor, for love of me, to suffer patiently, whatever I myself may choose, and give you, to endure, and you shall become a saint. If the things, which the world calls great, could be acquired, with as much facility, what worldling would not secure their possession? A constant desire of making progress, a continual striving after holiness, is rightly thought to constitute man's sanctity in this life. None if perfect in holiness, who does not exert himself to become more perfect, and the more one aims at greater perfection, the more holy does he prove himself to be. Therefore, my child, the perfection of holiness is not the work of a day, or a week. Do not then imagine that you shall be perfect in so short a time. For, by expecting this, and finding yourself afterwards disappointed, you might lose heart, or even be dangerously tempted to desist from further attempts. Perfection is the joint work of divine grace and man's cooperation. Now the goodness of my heart, which wills that you should be a saint, is much more inclined bountifully to bestow grace upon you than you ask. Even of its own accord, it pours grace upon you. Therefore, the more faithfully you cooperate with grace, the shorter of time in which you shall gain possession of sanctity. If you have a constant and effectual will of sanctifying yourself, nothing can hinder you from becoming a saint. Whatever your natural inclination may be, you will acquire holiness, not by the disposition of your character, but by the cooperation with grace, through your own free will. Neither your character, nor your state of life, nor your employment, will hinder you, if with a generous fidelity of heart, you cooperate with divine grace. Behold, great multitudes, which no one can count, have by this fidelity sanctified themselves in the religious state, and millions have become saints, even in the midst of the world. By this fidelity, a Henry became a saint in the camp, a Casimir, at the court, an Elzir, amid intercourse with the world, an Isidore, in the fields, an Agnes in the city, a Mary in the country, a Catherine, in her father's house, a Christina, in bondage. Neither does holiness depend on being inscribed in the catalogue of the blessed, or the saints, because this does not make the saint, but simply declares to men that he was such. If you are a saint in heaven, being perfectly conformed to the divine good pleasure, you will, of yourself, care little whether or not your name is found on earth, registered in the canon. Neither in fine, can temptations and difficulties present an obstacle. For whatever hell can contrive, whatever the world may attempt against you, all this, if you are willing, shall be made to contribute to your sanctification. It is indeed true that he who desires to acquire holiness should avoid all, even the slightest sins, but involuntary faults, which arise from human frailty, are no hindrance to perfection. Even the greatest saints were not altogether free from such miseries, and, so long as they lived upon earth, they experienced the frailty of their human nature. Be not troubled and uneasy about these things, where the will does not consciously take any part, a person may be very perfect, although he frequently offends involuntarily. According to the example of the saints, lessen involuntary defects, as much as you can, and, with quiet love, humble yourself before me, for these faults. In this manner, you will derive profit from them, for your progress. This being so, my child, listen to no one who, under some pretense or other, may turn you from the pursuit of holiness, neither to yourself, or any mortal, nor any spirit whatever. But, with a generous mind, that does not know despondency, continue to strive after interior sanctity. This sanctity is so important a matter, so full of honor, and so grateful to me, that sometimes one soul, thus sanctifying herself interiorly, glorifies me more, is more pleasing to me, and possesses more influence over my heart, than 1,000 others, that, although good, rest satisfied with an ordinary virtue. Know, my child, that holiness, to a certain degree, is really necessary to be admitted into the presence of the Divine Majesty, because, without holiness, none shall see God. If you do not attain to this necessary holiness in the life to come, you must be purified with fire, in the life to come, before you enter heaven, into which nothing, except what is holy, can gain admittance. Yet, for your consolation, remember, my child, that, if you keep a good and efficacious will, of really sanctifying yourself, you shall not taste death, until you have acquired sanctity. Meanwhile, never think that you have already attained to holiness, or that you are perfect, but ever advance, and pursue the destined prize of your supernatural vocation. Be of good courage, my child, dare to do things worthy of a disciple of my heart, live in zeal with the saints, your noble brothers and sisters. What you are, they have been; what they are, you can be. My child, so long as you live upon the earth, you cannot be freed from troubles. What is this whole mortal life, except affliction, which man enters weeping, through which he passes, amid sufferings, from which he departs, groaning? Since man is born subject to death, it is not possible that he should pass his life without pain, because the source of suffering lies within himself. The very condition of being subject to death naturally begets many and various miseries, diseases and sufferings, which cannot cease to exist, so long as that fruitful and effective cause remains. All these things, however, manifold and irksome though they may be, are of less importance. For, from the very bottom of corrupt nature, worse things spring up, inordinate and perverse desires, which force man to feel, in spite of himself, that which he would fain not feel. These are the passions, the sources of so many sufferings, which, inherent in the very heart, disturb the peace of many, which excite wars, horrid wars, which, by conflicting emotions, expose the soul to uncounted dangers and sorrows. And how numerous are the torments which befall man and without, and which none can wholly escape. Cold and heat, the difference of temperature, the thousand inconveniences arising from creatures, and many other effects of physical causes, which although they contribute to the general well-being, yet, through man's fault, in the state of fallen nature, and in the present order of things, cannot be brought about, without some trouble to individuals. And amid all of this, what mortal is not often burdened by labor, without which none can dwell here below, unless he be willing to be burdened still more. Add and count up, if you can, the sorrows and calamities of every kind, which arise from the passions of others, and you shall behold, on all sides troubles, which, unless you overcome them, will overwhelm you. Indeed, my child, since this mortal life is replete with hardships, so numerous, and so great, to not a few, it would appear almost unbearable, if the spirit of religion did not suggest reasons for patience, and my heart did not render us smooth, by the unction of grace. Neither has all the wisdom of this world, although it has uttered many beautiful sayings concerning endurance and suffering, ever been able to invent and afford a remedy for them. How many there have been who are devoid of the spirit of religion, and strangers to my heart, whether through unbelief or corruption, should, at last, despair, amid their troubles, and their reason being blinded, should wickedly terminate their miseries, by the greatest of all, an everlasting misfortune. But religion renders all troubles both bearable and useful, since it teaches, that, through the consoling effect of the wisdom and goodness of my heart, that, which was a just punishment of sin, and a just cause of grief to man, becomes a wholesome remedy against sin, and a plentiful harvest of merits. The furnace tests metals. Fire hardens clay, but softens wax. The storm throws down the plant, but renders the tree, that is well rooted, more firm. So, also my child, does tribulation try men. Affliction hardens the one, it softens the other. Opposition casts down some, it makes others more solid. Affliction would lead all to bliss, if all were to receive it properly. If, on its account, anyone hastens on to destruction, it is his own fault, since, rightly born, it would prove a sure road to sanctity, and consequently, to true happiness. But, behold my child, every affliction has become much lighter, and more consoling, since by my own afflictions, I sanctified affliction, and walk before those who suffer affliction, as well, by the example of my life, as by the promise of reward, and the aid of consolation of grace. By my example, the saints learned the secret of suffering rightly, and the art of converting evil to good. Hence, they learned by experience, that afflictions were even sweet to them, and derived such a longing to suffer for love of me, they that were unwilling to live without suffering, and overflowed with joy in their every tribulation. Can you also aspire to the like, my child? Is not this, my interest, as well as your own? Why do you fear? No affliction can reach your heart if they have not first passed through mine, and, by so doing, they lose all their power of hurting, and become imbued with the divine virtue of consolation. Take heed, lest by the sourness of your heart, you embitter afflictions, when they come from my heart, imbued with sweetness. Suffering is necessary, there is no choice, but whether to suffer well, or ill, whether after the manner of the elect, or, after that of the reprobate, whether for your sanctification, or for your condemnation, this is optional, this my child, depends upon your choice. Prepare yourself, be ready for annoyances, which do not cease to occur, and shall never cease. Do not believe, that you shall ever have a day, without some trouble, since there can never be a day, without its supply of malice. Neither imagine that with efforts, you may make, you shall be able to escape. Even if, you withdraw into the wilderness alone, or cross the sea, or hide yourself, in the uttermost boundaries, of the earth, misery, shall be your companion everywhere, and shall ever follow you, as its cause or occasion, like a shadow, pursues the body. Therefore my child, if you are wise, endeavor to make that useful, which you cannot avoid, by bearing the cross of your affliction, with an even and well-disposed mind, as did the saints, and by cheerfully, following my footsteps. If you will undergo tribulation, with ease and profit, do it for love of me. This love will take away the heaviness, and bitterness, of your cross, and by its virtue, will sanctify your cross, and yourself, through its means. Whoever does not suffer his afflictions, for love of me, will not long carry his cross, with alacrity, but he will soon begin, either to drag it along, toiling and groaning, or overburdened by it, he will sink down, in his wretchedness. If you find any difficulty in suffering, my child, come to my heart, and pray. Here you shall obtain relief, love, and the unction of grace. My child, I have never ceased telling you, nor will I cease to repeat it, pray, do not fail to pray. In prayer there is everything. By prayer, you are freed from evils, by prayer you obtain all good things. In prayer, you have a remedy for misfortune, by prayer sorrow is soothed, in prayer you secure consolation and perseverance. Consider, my child, what were the sentiments of my heart, in suffering and rejoicing, at the same time. Understand what I say, my child. I speak not of my divine will, since it was exempt from suffering, and incapable of it, but of my human will. For by this I practiced virtues, by this I acquired merits, by this I wrought the redemption of men. From the first existence of my humanity, my heart possessed the fullness of joy, by reason of the vision of the divinity, hypostatically united to it, which it ever enjoyed, and whereby I was supremely blissful, and, at the same time, by a special dispensation, my heart was suffering, in view of the cruelty and bitterness of the passion which it was to undergo. Moreover, at the same time, but under a different aspect, my heart was grieved, and rejoiced at its sorrow and bitter passion. It was grieved, inasmuch as the sufferings were painful and disagreeable to my humanity. It was rejoiced, insomuch as God had willed and ordained them, for the salvation of men. For my heart was endowed with a human will, which although one in itself, was as if it were twofold in its operation, the one inferior, which of itself shrunk and fled from things distressful to human nature, the other, superior, which, for loftier motives, deliberately loved and embraced those same painful things. Both parts, the inferior, as well as the superior, were ever upright, never ill-ordered, nor weakened, by any defect whatsoever. The inferior, which regarded and desired the good and advantage of its own nature, and dreaded and shunned the sufferings of nature and death, at the same time, allowed itself to be guided by the superior. The superior rendered the inferior, as well as itself, submissive, and conformed to the divine will. Hence, the supernatural acts of virtues performed, hence the plenitude of the treasures of graces accumulated for men. Remember, my child, that you possess a similar will, not indeed equally perfect and unimpaired, yet truly free, and that you also find an inferior and a superior part. My child, you do not always, nor at the same time, know all you shall have to suffer. It happens through a special kindness and mercy, that for the most part, you do not see them, except when they come upon you, that you may bear them the more easily, one by one. But, my suffering was ever in my sight, wherever I was, all my future torments were constantly before my eyes. For at no time was hidden from me all that the prophets had foretold I was to suffer, all that the ancient types and figures had foreshadowed, all that the wickedness of the world and of hell was to attempt, all the horrid tortures for which the sins of men were crying out, all that the insulted glory of my heavenly Father required, all that your own wants, my child, demanded. All and each of these things were before my eyes, and pressed unceasingly upon my heart. But the love of my heart brought it to pass, that I willingly endured, and bore all. Love renders everything savory to me, labors and watching, insults and mockeries, scourgings and thorns, the cross, and whatever things were prepared, by the divine will, for the blissfulness of men. Lo, my child, the chief disposition of my heart, love for God, and for men. From this source, flowed all its other dispositions. Hence arose, that inexhaustible patience of my heart, whereby I endured, without bitter feeling, or complaint, so many things, so cruel and undeserved. For love is patient, charity endures all things. Hence, amid all my sorrows and afflictions, the resignation of heart to the divine good pleasure. For, with my will, conformed by love to the divine will, I was ready willingly to undergo everything. Hence my joy amid suffering. For he that loves and understands the goodness of the object beloved is glad when he possesses the same. But my heart understood perfectly the excellence of the divine will, therefore too, it delighted to fulfill it, even in the many and various sufferings Hence, the supernatural longing of my heart, for suffering. For true love, desires to testify effectually its sincerity, tenderness, and fidelity. Therefore my heart was forever goaded on by love, always desiring to consummate that passion, which was for God, and should remain for man, a manifest and ever-enduring proof of the sincerity, the tenderness, the fidelity, of the excess of my love. But, my child, the love of my heart, went even beyond this. For to ravish the hearts of men, by its excess, and to inflame them, with its own fire, this is what it willed, this is what I coveted. I had come to cast a fire upon the earth, and what did I will, except that it should be kindled? For this, I had the baptism of my blood, living and boiling hot, wherewith I was to be baptized. My passion, I mean, into which I was to be immersed, and plunged completely. And how was I straitened, until it were accomplished? How was my heart burned, to open the heated bath, which by its wonderful power, should cleanse, warm, stimulate, and enkindle the hearts of men. This bath cleansed, and inflamed, the apostles and martyrs, the holy confessors, and virgins, who were ready, with a pure heart, to suffer all things, to follow me through all afflictions, mortifications, 1,000 torments, 1,000 deaths. And cannot also your heart be enkindled, my child? For this did I, all along, love you so much, that I might gain for myself, your love. Love renders everything savory to me, labors and watching, insults and mockeries, scourgings and thorns, the cross, and whatever things were prepared, by the divine will for the blissfulness of men. Lo, my child, the chief disposition of my heart, love for God, and for men. From this source, flowed all its other dispositions. My child, if you would more frequently, and more attentively, consider to what a degree I have loved you, and how many more reasons you have, to love me than I have, to love you, you would doubtless, be excited to require my love, with your love. And, if love do once take possession of your heart, it will produce sentiments, with respect to sufferings, akin to the sentiments, of my heart. The more you love me, the better will you feel disposed, towards sufferings, and with how much the more willing a heart you suffer, the more perfectly, will you love me. If it happens, that you do not relish the sentiments of my heart, with respect to afflictions, it is a sign, that your heart is not healthful, that is ill affected, and, upon examination, you shall find that the cause is, that your heart, devoid of divine warmth, is benumbed, by the coldness of a certain indifference, or is feverish, with the vitiated fire, of self-love. However, from the very fact that you are still so ill-disposed, that you are unable to taste, and relish those things, which are so worthy of great souls, take occasion to bestir, and stimulate yourself courageously. And desire and covet at least, that your heart may become animated, with the same sentiments, that pervade mine. Pray frequently and fervently, even though nature struggles against it, that you may be enabled, to understand the worth of these sentiments, and love the priceless advantage of them. If in thus praying, you are sincere, the eyes of your mind, will be opened, so as to see clearly, that the wisdom of the world, which abhors the love of wholesome humiliations, and mortifications, is true folly, but that the salutary love, which I myself, coming down from heaven, taught, by word and example, is pure wisdom. And you preserve in prayer, plentiful grace shall be bestowed upon you, religiously to embrace tribulations, and to endure them, in a holy manner. However, to not be satisfied with prayer alone, but endeavor also, according to the amount of grace, and of your strength, to deny yourself, to endure afflictions, and to carry the cross, with me. Blessed is he, who relishes sufferings, which may sanctify him. He certainly is taught rather by divine unction, than by human skill, he is animated rather by grace, than by nature. There is nothing, my child, whereby, the true disciples of my heart, are better distinguished, than by esteem, and love of sufferings, for my sake. My child, to you it is given to understand the secrets of my heart, to enter devoutly into them, to direct them fully to your progress. Hear, then, the secrets which are hidden from the world. Learn the good things, which the worldlings do not understand. Behold, walking in the way of the cross, I the Creator, have gone before my creatures, I the Redeemer, before those whom I had set free, I, a father before my children, and to all men I have made it known, that whoever is willing to be partaker of the unutterable bliss that awaits me, at the end of the journey, should, with the proper interior disposition of heart, deny himself, and follow me. But many hearing this, have said at all times, this is a hard saying, and who can hear it? And, hence many withdrew, and no longer walked with me any more. The saints however, and all they that were really willing to sanctify themselves, received my invitation, with a thankful heart, and judged that their happiness, even upon earth, consisted in being with me, in suffering with me, and in persevering with me, through every trial, until the end. And, indeed, my child, what good is there on earth, which may not be found, in suffering with me? Here is true glory, a glory, which is worthy of the divine approval, a glory, which does not pass away with this world, a glory, which shall endure and be exalted forevermore. This is the hidden treasure, that buys the kingdom of heaven, with its entire unended blessedness. This is the pure delight, exceeding all the feelings. For if you arrive at this, that you rejoiced, in suffering with me, you obtain possession of a spiritual paradise of delights, upon earth. While everything flows according to nature's inclinations, and while no trouble oppresses the heart, a person is wont to cling to creatures, to turn rarely towards me, and to feel it irksome, to busy himself with the things of eternity. But when he labors under adversity, and is pressed by affliction, he turns again to his heart, he perceives how vain, how perishable, are all the things of this world. He flies straight to me, whom he finds, by experience, most of all needed by himself. Therefore, my child, the kind of providence of my heart, is wont so to act, that they who are affluent, with possessions of this world, do not enjoy them, without inconvenience, in order, that they may be excited more easily and effectively, to seek the treasures of the life, to come. For if they possessed a quiet and undisturbed felicity, amid worldly riches, they would perhaps, not even think of laying up heavenly treasures. It is then, a merciful dispensation, that evils abound in the world, lest the world might be loved, and its votaries, might perish. As fire consumes rust, and purifies gold, so sufferings, exhaust and deaden the passions, and render virtues more pure, and precious. By tribulation, properly endured, my child, you redeem your sins, and you satisfy the divine justice, for punishments still due, insomuch, that in this manner, you can have here, a slight and consoling purgatory, from which, through the gates of death, you may deserve to win your flight, to everlasting joys. What is there, that can make you merit more, than suffering, endured with a proper disposition of heart? For, light and momentary tribulation, as work out for you a never-enduring weight of glory. Every affliction, will add a new jewel to your heavenly crown, which shall glitters with as many rays, as you have performed acts of virtue. In adversity, man is freed from many false notions, and errors, and instructed in many ways. Happy is he, that in the school of affliction, is taught to be wise, in all things. What does he know, who has never experienced adversity, has never endured anything, either inwardly, or outwardly? And where can he be useful in counsel, or guidance, either to himself, or to others? Therefore, child, do not lose courage, when you are tried, or reproved by me. For whoever I love, him do I lovingly reprove, in order to train him, and, in him, as a father in his son, am I well pleased. You should therefore be justly glad amid sufferings, since in them you may have an indication of my esteem for you, and a token of the fatherly love of my heart. There is scarcely anything else to be found, which produces a greater confidence, in my heart, or a freer access to it, than to suffer willingly, for my sake. When you are about to die, my child, you will rejoice over no circumstance of your life so securely, nor find so safe a consolation in nothing else, as in the most agreeable remembrance of having suffered much with me. Very many study to shun the way of humiliation and affliction, pleading as an excuse, that they can both better glorify God, and help their neighbor, in a more agreeable way. What a delusion! They do not seek God, or their neighbor, but themselves. For the glory of God, and the salvation of the neighbor are not to be promoted, according to God's good pleasure. Now, God indicated to his Son, the manner of glorifying on earth his majesty, and of saving the lost world. And this manner, the Son followed by suffering, and by suffering he made it known to man. My child, follow the path which I myself have trodden, and showed you. And so that you may be able to keep on this path, pray frequently, and fervently. While praying, ponder devoutly, all my sorrows of every kind, and the supernatural dispositions of my heart, all the while. Do not consult merely natural inclinations, or purely human feelings, but, by means of supernatural principles, elevate yourself, above sensible things, and view tribulations, as sent by the divine will, and, inasmuch as you are able, embrace them affectionately. Courage, then my child, cheer on your heart. Behold me, and all the saints with me, cheerfully treading the path of sufferings. Be bold to follow. With me nothing is to be feared, the company is select, the way safe, the goal certain, the reward everlasting. My child, I had now enlightened the world by my doctrine, enkindled it with my love, and rendered it blissful, to a certain extent, by the perpetual gift of my whole self. Nothing remained, except to complete all, by undergoing the utmost sufferings, through an excess of that same love. Having therefore left the supper room, I went where the will of my Father called me, where also the desire of my heart directed me, to the mountain of the Olives. Ponder well, my child, what were the sentiments of my heart, while I proceeded, in the silence of the night, and beheld distinctly, rushing upon me, all, and each one, of the torments of my passion. Sorrowful journey filled with unutterable distress, and anguish of heart. Yet, I went on courageously, because I was following the divine good pleasure. As throughout my life, so now, while sorrows were falling upon me, from every side, my heart united with divine will, generously, and lovingly, embraced adversity, as the gift of my Father's will. You also, my child, when you are suffering, do not regard the afflictions in themselves, but lift up your eyes, and consider the divine will that sends them to you, for your good, although you yourself do not see that they are for your advantage. Indeed, child, except sin, nothing takes place without the divine will. But whatever happens, sin accepted, is good, not evil, since it proceeds from the will, which is guided by infinite wisdom, sustained by infinite power, moved by an infinite goodness, is indeed able to effect whatever it wills, but it can will nothing absolutely for mortals, except what is good for them. And, since creatures, whatever they may wickedly attempt, cannot impede the divine will concerning you, so often as anything which is not sinful, in any manner, befalls you, it is manifest that it happens by the divine will, and is for your good. Sin, however, as he is infinitely good, God cannot will, but, in his infinite providence, he may, and does permit it, both that he may not take away man's will, and that, by a way which will be understood and admired in the other world, he may extol his own perfections. Infinitely perfect as he is, he knows how to draw good out of evil, and he judged it better to draw good out of evil than not to permit that evil should be possible. My child, some things happen which a person cannot avoid, and must endure, whether he likes it or not. Happy is he that under these occurrences resigns himself to the divine will, and strives to conform himself, so that, uniting his own with the divine will, he suffers no longer through necessity, but of his own accord. By this voluntary resignation, tribulations become not only meritorious, but also lighter. If you would understand this well, my child, so that, when afflictions of this kind present themselves, you do not, through a blameworthy opposition, lose all merit, and add misery to misery. For what can be more miserable, in this life, than never to will what shall always be? Other things happen, which one cannot escape, without sin, so that, he must either endure them, or incur guilt. Oh, how unwisely, how unbecomingly, do they act, who, to be free from troubles, do not hesitate to have recourse to unlawful means. Is it proper so, to use the portion of my chalice, which is truly a divine gift, and which is never sent, before it has been tasted, and seasoned, by my heart? Lastly, other things again, which man may turn aside, without guilt. Yet when no virtue forbids, it is according to the divine good pleasure, to embrace the same cordially. My child, if you are a true disciple of my heart, you will allow no occasion of this kind to pass by, but, holding your heart ever in readiness, when an opportunity presents itself, of humbling and mortifying yourself, without danger, you will accept it as a gift from me, and embrace it with the greater affection, because, as nature has no share, and your heart is moved solely by my good pleasure, you are able to display a pure love to me. Fervent disciples of my heart, not satisfied with things which present themselves, often, of their own accord, seek for opportunities of suffering something for me, and of conforming themselves to me, for they know that I delight especially in this likeness to me, as in a perfect evidence of their love. There are they, who, with their mind and heart, ever live, in the past, or in the future, who are wholly taken up with thinking over the causes or circumstances of wrongs, which formerly have been done to them, or hail afar off future adversity, while they studiously avoid the present. How greatly are those persons to be pitied! For they are tormented by the past, and deluded by the future. In imagination they endure much, attempt much, but in reality they are wonderful self-tormentors, and vain dreamers. How many of them resolve to endure, one day hard things, and meanwhile, do not even bear what is easy? Beware, child, of an imaginary perfection, which covers self-love, and is altogether an illusion. Take advantage of the present, seize every opportunity, however little, of practicing virtue. Great occasions rarely, ordinary ones, frequently occur, and a small matter, rightly endured, is a preparation for what is great. My child, if, in every occurrence, behold my divine will, you must not heed, through whom it is, that these adverse things come upon you, whether through a superior, an equal, or an inferior, whether through one who is good, or one who is wicked, but, you must receive them, without distinction, regarding the divine will, alone, which makes use of various instruments, for its own most holy ends. To help your weakness, first, in suffering adversity, resign yourself, even to patience, and, even though you neither love sufferings, nor are pleased with them, endure what is to be borne, without bitterness of heart, without uttering complaints. Employ all the means in your power, and persevere, until you have become accustomed to be patient, and to be resigned to the divine will, amid troubles of ordinary occurrence. Having attained to the first degree, conform yourself to my will, in every affliction, willing the same, because I will it, unwilling to be freed therefrom, so long as I do not will that you should be free. To arrive at this, you ought to pray much, that your intellect may be enlightened from above, and that, by the aid of grace, your will, for supernatural motives, may be solidly conformed to mine, so that you feel persuaded, both by faith and love, that there is nothing better than the divine will. After reaching the second degree, aim at the highest. Strive with all your strength to unite yourself with the divine will, as not only to be conformed in suffering adversity, but to be the self-same with it. Then, my child, shall this union of wills exist between us, when your heart, animated with the same sentiments towards the cross that possess mine, rejoices, like mine, in uniformity with the divine good pleasure. This union of wills is an important matter, is true perfection, solid sanctity. Pure love alone begets this holy union, which cannot exist without elevating and ennobling man, and rendering him blissful. My child, if you love me, you will also love my will. It is enough for him that loves, to know the desire of the one beloved, in order to execute it with a joyful heart. Come, then, dearly beloved, embrace with your heart's whole affection the divine good pleasure, and prove, in this manner, that you are a true disciple of my heart, a lover, not of yourself, but of me. So act, so live, that I may find in you a person, according to my heart, one who accomplishes all my wishes, as well in adversity as in prosperity. my child, when I had now entered the garden of olives, whilst the earth was silent, all around, there rushed and pressed upon me, on the one hand, all the sins of the world, on the other, the frightful tortures of my passion, and with such violence did they crowd upon my heart that although it is the strength of them that are weak, it began to fear, to grow weary, sad, and disconsolate. But, when I beheld distinctly, that by the great sufferings taken upon me, with so much love, and offered up with so great a mercy, for the salvation of all men, not a few would refuse to be saved, and would, by a wilful hard-heartedness, misuse them, for their deeper destruction, and return me at last nothing, except the blackest gratitude. Then, my child, my heart, growing faint with anguish, forced me to exclaim, my soul is sorrowful, even unto death. However, having withdrawn from my disciples, and advanced a little, kneeling down, I prayed. Meanwhile, by the struggle between the superior and inferior part of my heart, my sorrows increasing to such a degree, that my sweat became as drops of blood, trickling down upon the ground. I fell upon my face, and, being in an agony, I prayed the longer. And as my agony, on account of that inward struggle, continued, I persevered in prayer, Father, if thou wilt, remove this chalice from me, yet, not my will, but thine be done. Then child, sent from heaven, an angel appeared, not to take away the chalice of my passion, which my Father willed me wholly to drain, but to strengthen me, that, when joy was set before me, without my passion, despising the shame, I might voluntarily endure the cross. Reflect, my child, how painful a struggle my heart underwent that night, a struggle on the result of which hung the salvation of the world. My heart fought, laboring, wrestling, resisting, even unto blood, and overcame, but it conquered in prayer. Behold, my child, behold a source of varied consolation, for you, my heart struggling with death, and praying, fighting by love, triumphing by love. For to what extent I tasted their bitterness. And all this, child, to teach, to relieve, to encourage you. Do not be cast down, nor wonder, when you feel repugnance to suffering. For, if my heart, although holy and perfect, felt its pains to such a degree, what wonder, if your heart feels them likewise? But never shall you experience, never shall you feel so much, as my heart felt. Were you to endure at once in your heart, whatever you shall have to suffer, during your whole life, it would be no more than a little drop of the chalice, which my heart drained, in that garden. Whatever reluctance you experience in yourself, follow my example, do not yield to nature, opposing the example I have given you. To this end, in every difficulty, in every anguish, hasten without delay, to prayer. If when you are troubled, you have recourse to prayer, distress will prove gainful to you. By prayer, you shall either be delivered from it with merit, or you shall be helped to endure it, for your good. Come then, my child, and with knees bent, or with your heart at least, humbly prostrate, pray, like myself, pray that, if it be the divine will, the cup of your affliction may pass away, yet, not so that your will, but the divine will, be done. Pray if this chalice may not pass away, that you obtain grace, to be resigned, to submit yourself to drink it. Be of good cheer, my child, under no circumstances shall you ever have afflictions, which will require you to struggle so much, in order to be resigned, as I had to contend. You shall never have a contest, which will cause you a bloody sweat. Whatever difficulty you may have, exert yourself, wrestle, and fight with yourself, to overcome your feeling. Struggling again and again, pray, and pray the longer, until you have rendered your heart conformed to the divine will, and prepared it, in spite of nature, to follow me, through every hardship, which may be sent to your heart, from above. It is a great misfortune for you, child, that you are wont to have recourse to prayer, rather slowly, and first try human skill, that you suffer the unwearied enemy of your salvation, and the ill-regulated propensity of nature, to obtain too great a sway over your heart. Do not take notice of the suggestions of the devil, nor of any passion whatever. For by false reasonings, they seek to deceive, to injure you. Forbidding yourself all reasoning, all intercourse with them, come straightway to my heart. Here, there is your counsel, here, your help, here, your comfort. Even had an angel visibly been sent down from heaven, you should not be left without consoling aid, if you pray, as it behooves you. And if, despite your pious efforts, you continue to feel opposition within yourself, be not on that account dejected. Provided your will be resigned to the divine will, this repugnance felt, indeed, but not willed, so far from doing you harm, shall on the contrary, if you struggle against it, be of the greatest advantage to you. It is the characteristic of an heroic disciple of my heart, to pray and endeavor with all his strength, to overcome himself completely, as well in those things, from which nature shrinks, as in those to which it is prone. When you pray in affliction, child, you ought to pray that you are willing to be resigned, whether you obtain relief or, instead receive something else, which is better for you, because more conformable to the divine will, or whether you taste sweetness, or experience bitterness. For that prayer is not the best, in which the greatest consolations are felt. Since what is sweet is not always useful, nor is that which is bitter always hurtful. No, even more, in man's present state, sweetness is wont to do harm, bitterness to be advantageous. That is the best prayer, from which you go with greater humility, and greater charity, and feel so disposed, that, in order to do the good pleasure of God, you are willing to go efficaciously, against whatever is displeasing. How pitiful a sight before God, and angels, and men, to see persons, who daily pray long, and much, go thence, and carry nothing away with them, except fault of negligence, and abuse of grace, or a more delicate pride, and self-love, having in no wise become better inclined towards their duties, nor able to bear the defects of their neighbor, and still unwilling to curb their own inclinations. You, my child, do pray better, as taught by my example. Pray and overcome nature, pray, and resign, and conform yourself to the divine good pleasure. These arduous efforts shall not long be needed. Yet a little while, and you shall not now prepare yourself for tribulations, nor encourage yourself in them, but you shall sing glad and glorious triumphs with the saints, who all have come out of great tribulation, and who now, in their reward, are enraptured by the unbroken excessive rejoicings, and exult forevermore. My child, when I rose from prayer, following the good pleasure of my heavenly Father, I came to my disciples to teach you by example, as well as to obtain through them some comfort in my extreme affliction. But alas, I found them heavy with sadness, and buried in sleep, so that, when awakened, far from offering me any relief, they did not know what to say, and instead of giving me comfort, they themselves needed solace. It was the bitterest bitterness to my heart, child, to see those very ones, whom I had trained with more than a father's care, whom I had cherished with so great a love, when I had solaced so often, now during my passion, so indifferent, so heedless, that they could not even for 1 hour watch with me. Where are now these promises, lately made, that they would be faithful to me, even unto death? Where is their pledged word? Where the constancy, so solemnly avowed? All of this has vanished, but it passed through my heart, and oh, how deep a wound did it inflict. However, since, while I was suffering, I did not go to my disciples, except by the will of my Father, according to the same good pleasure of my Father, I embraced with my heart resigned the pains which followed my recourse to them. Is it not then forbidden, my child, amid distresses, to resort from comfort to creatures, provided it be done in a befitting manner? Now, you will do it in this manner, if you apply to creatures solely as a means of conforming, and uniting yourself, more easily, and more perfectly, to the divine will. It is not peculiar to the more perfect disciple of my heart, to suffer, and to conceal, so far as allowed, their suffering from man, and to lay open, and to communicate to me alone, the afflictions of their hearts. But child, if you are not yet able to reach so great a height of perfection, go after having first prayed to some pious and interior person, not to receive sensible comfort from him, but to be relieved and assisted, so as the better to come to my heart, the fountain of true consolation, and to cling to me, rather than to any other solace whatsoever. Indeed, if you are truly wise, you will cleave to me, who ought to be your greatest comfort. For united to me, even should you be deprived of all other solace, you should calmly repose upon my heart. And what can there be more sweet? What more secure? So often as in your troubles, you need counsel or guidance, or are too exposed to danger of delusion, do not trust in yourself alone, lest you err in your senses, and be deceived by the appearance of good. For it is chiefly in these matters that I am wont to lead man, both that the order of my divine providence may shine forth the more clearly, and that men may love each other the more dearly, when they find, by experience, that they are not sufficient for themselves, but that each needs the assistance of the other. And they, who under such circumstances, deem themselves too wise to need the direction of others, are wont to have a termination full of dangers. Sometimes, also, to have recourse to a created means, is not only a counsel of security, but a precept of obligation. It has been most wisely, and properly established, and ordained, that man should be helped by the other creatures, which were made for his real good, that at one time, by abstaining from them, he may practice virtue at another, that he may be exercised by them, for his salvation and perfection, and again, that he may use them as means. Marvelous is my providence, in all my works. All things serve me, if you love me, child, they will also serve you. Now, when it benefits you to use creatures as a means, this use should be carefully attended to, and the result should be looked for, that in whatever way the matter may turn out, you are resigned to the divine will. For after having employed a sufficient diligence, the result, whatever it may be, will be to you a sign of the divine good pleasure. Sometimes I inspire designs to the execution, where I will that men should apply themselves with courage and perseverance, although I do not will their success. In which event they obtain a twofold advantage: on the one hand, the merit of the labor for a successful execution; on the other, the merit of resignation, at the unfavorable result. If any of your affairs have an unhappy end, through your own fault, grieve for the fault, but accept with patience the pain of the misfortune, and bear it willingly. For the fault is indeed contrary to my will, but the pain consequent of the fault must be grieved for and detested, but the pain should be embraced, and lovingly undergone. And if any misfortune happen, through another's fault, resign yourself, even in such an event, neither lose your patience, or your peace of heart. For if I permit the successful issue of anything to be hindered by the fault of others, this is itself a sign that I do not will you should be successful. And as while permitting the fault, I hate it, and will at the same time, the unfavorable issue of your undertaking, so you, with a similar disposition of heart, abhor that fault, and embrace the unpropitious result. My child, were your heart rightly disposed, you would be resigned under all circumstances, that you might gather from each of them a new pearl to adorn your heavenly crown. Assuredly, a great and supernatural discernment is required, for the right use of the creatures, for even if one begins with a good intention, to employ them, he may easily become entangled, and go wrong. You should pray, therefore, and implore the light and assistance of grace, that you may remain free, and neither fail, by the neglect of created means, nor exceed, in the use of them.